So that should start on. There we go. Welcome, everyone.
Cool. Everybody, welcome to ProductTank, the first ProductTank of 2021. Everybody excited for the new year and deciding what we're going to focus on this year on our products. As a bit of background, if you haven't been to a ProductTank before, ProductTank is an organization that runs in 150 plus cities around the world. And we're set up with the idea of product managers helping one another and building products in the best way possible, because product management is hard and helping one another is the way to go. If you need a bit more support in terms of some of the elements that you can get from ProductTank, there's a Mind the Product newsletter, which is available. You can write a blog or read the blog, which is on mindtheproduct.com. There is also a Slack channel at slack.mindtheproduct.com, and also a great place to get tips, ask for feedback, and look for jobs. And if you wanted to speak at ProductTank Bristol, you can contact us. Currently, you can use Lily at houseof10.co. And really, product management, Mind the Product is also about giving as much support in terms of training as possible. So also available is Mind the Product training at mindtheproduct.com/training. And as this is the first ProductTank of 2021, we're officially now in the future. And so tonight you're going to hear a little bit about that from our guest speaker, who is Gibson Biddle. He's the former VP of product at Netflix and CPO of Chegg, and he now spends his time teaching and helping people learn more about product management. And I'm personally really looking forward to this talk, because I love Gibson's engaging speaking style. So over to you, Gibson.
Thanks a ton, Philip. Thanks, ProductTank. Hey, Holly, you want to make sure everybody knows how to use Slido?
For sure. So get your mobile phones out and use your cameras to pick up the QR code. Tap the link and you should be able to access it on the browser on your phone.
Fantastic. And who gets the prize for being the furthest from you, Holly?
Is this Mendoza, Argentina? I think that person might win.
Yeah, I think you're right. Do we have a lavish gift for that person?
Do we have a what?
Oh, that's right. It's great. So as Philip says, I use Slido a lot for interactive polling. And I've been asking this question. I asked it all of last year, and I would get different responses in different weeks in different countries. But the simple question is, over the last month, what has caused you the most stress? What was it for you, Rebecca, the most stressful thing about the last month?
For me, I think it was my parents, actually, which isn't on that list, due to COVID-19. So they're a bit, I'd say, blasé. And when it first got announced, they're like, oh, this will blow over. Everyone's making a big fuss about nothing. And even during the center of lockdown, they'd be telling me, oh, yeah, we went out this place and that place. And I'd be like...
Well, I can tell you do not think your parents are watching. Irving, what was it for you on this list? What caused you to... Oh, have you muted yourself?
I did mute myself. I think, yeah, just COVID for me. I think, like everyone else, it's just been a bit crazy. So,
got it. Yeah, and we're all looking for good movie and TV show recommendations. So share them here. You can give multiple responses. This is just me warming up. I'll start the main presentation in a minute and show. I just want to make sure everybody can use Slido. You can also ask questions with Slido. You can upvote them there as well. And then I'll do my best to answer all the questions. You can, via chat, you can ask questions as well. The team will be watching the chat. So it's a great way to talk with us. Let's see. Darwin, is your favorite movie, TV show showing up on the screen as yet?
Hi there. Well, as a bit of an escape from the COVID stress, then if you want something light, then I would recommend Bridgerton.
Okay, I haven't watched it yet.
That has been good. It's very trashy, but enjoyable. And I can't believe I've just missed on the internet that I've watched that, but there you go.
Yeah, I love Schitt's Creek too.
I need to check that out.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. I can see it. It just popped up. I haven't watched Soul yet, and of course I watched the Queens Gambit, which is freaking awesome. Okay, so you got the drill. You can ask questions using Slido as well. I've also posted a PDF of this presentation, as well as some other relevant links at gibsonbiddle.com/ProductTank. And towards the end of the presentation, Irving will be dropping all these links. So my talk today, I want to talk about why inventing the future is so hard. And it's really kind of in 3 chapters. I'm going to talk about Mars, of all things. And then I'm going to talk about some relevant ideas from Netflix. And then I'm going to talk a little bit and bring it home to talk about your rocket ship, whatever startup or company that you're working with today. And I just want you to imagine for a moment that you just started a new job. And your job is to colonize Mars. Now, this is a very future-oriented job that's really freaking hard. And I borrowed from another cool episodic TV series from Netflix, which is called Away. It's really quite good. But I just want to think about how hard it would be as a product leader to build a product, a mechanism, so that people are eventually living on Mars. And I just want to share with you how radically different everybody's assumptions are about how hard or easy this is, how much time it will take, and what the critical challenges will be. By nicely asking the question, what year do you think the first human will land on Mars? And I am expecting to see a wild diversity of thinking here, which is, everybody comes to the table with different assumptions, different guesses. And this is just part of why inventing the future is so hard. Imagine your job as a leader to get everybody aligned on the same vision and actually believe that this is possible. And that is one of the significant challenges of product leadership. Holly, what year did you guess here?
I actually went for never.
Never. You're the most curmudgeonly person on the webinar today, Holly.
Sorry.
No, that's no apology needed. There's no right or wrong answer, but it will take you 25 years or so to know if you're right.
That's true.
Let's see, Philip, are you surprised by any of the responses here?
Not surprised. I picked 2035 because I'm an optimist, but we're a bit busy at the moment with other things. So 2025 seemed a bit soon.
Do you happen to know when Elon Musk said it will happen?
I think it was 2035, I think.
Elon Musk just recently said it would be in about 2 or 3 years. Okay. It's like, this is a very brave person. And my next question in this challenge of your new job is, which of the following items will be your greatest challenge? So I've just given you about 5 choices, but I'd love to hear, and by the way, you guys are doing awesome. I saw like 50 odd Slido votes, if you will. So thank you for playing. But my next question here is, which of these things, as the product leader for this project, Colonizing Mars, which are the most challenging aspects of making this happen? What do you think, Rebecca?
For me, I put returning from Mars, because I think there's all the excitement and everyone's like all about getting there. And we've had loads of shows about how you live on there, so we'll be fine living there, but no one really thinks about, getting back.
Okay, it's a detail, right? It's a detail, Rebecca. Hey, what if your parents were on the first trip there?
They'd have a lot of trouble.
You see this wide diversity. What's really the problem that that you're trying to solve. And there's a wide array of problems. And again, your challenge as a product leader is to give a vision of the future that will help people to understand, what really are the problems that you need to solve and in what order. And that's really what product vision is all about. I'm guessing most of you have seen The Martian. Just it gives you a little bit more context. If you recall, Matt Damon had landed on Mars. He'd been abandoned by the crew. He began to do the farming, et cetera, and then his everything blew up. And he's talking to the Earth and saying, I've got to grow 4 years of food on a planet that doesn't have soil. I'm going to science the shit out of this. Okay. And this really brings you to the mentality of what's required to make these kinds of things happen, to invent the future. For me, inventing the future is a series of decisions about people, product, and the business. And there are these three ideas that I tend to focus on. One is consumer science. And consumer science is all about a series of experiments just to see what works. And another is having a strategy or a plan or a fuzzy vision of the future. And then the third element is the culture. Think about this. This is going to be a 50-year effort, if you will. And people will come and go from organizations that take on this challenge. But the consistent thing is the culture. And the culture is what imbues the skills and behaviors required of product leaders at that organization to make great decisions about people, product, and the business. And you can see in this, I put a rocket. You can see this is one of a single stage rocket from SpaceX, but you can see it has multiple jets. And I sort of think of these three circles, consumer science and strategy and culture, as three jets in a booster rocket. And it's combining all three of these things that really makes things come to life in the long term. So I'm just going to give you a way of thinking about this would be my product vision, if you will, for colonizing Mars. And it's illustrating one of my frameworks, which I call the GLEe framework. And Elon Musk is really executing on this playbook right now, if you will. So the first step is to get big on reusable rockets. So he's figured out a way to take off, but then to have the rockets land again. And that's substantially bringing the cost of all of this down. And then the next step, and this could be 5 or 10 years out, SpaceX will lead in the development of in-space fuel, food, and oxygen production. So much fuel is required to get out of Earth orbit is the fuzzy vision that you'll actually refuel rockets in space to avoid breaking out of the Earth orbit. And then the next phase in this multi-journey is to expand into Mars-based transport partnerships, working with other companies to get these vehicles going back and forth. And finally, this last engages a partnership. You will find yourself into the business of space construction. Where do humans live? So this is a fuzzy vision of the future that's intended by Musk and others to give some sense of how this might play out over time. And it's not exact because you don't actually know what's going to happen, which experiments will fail or not. And I call this the GLEe model because you can see that it spells GLEe. But it's a multi-step product vision that helps people understand the series of problems that you're solving over time. Why did I choose to focus on Mars? It just highlights that inventing the future requires a bunch of things. It requires multi-stage rockets, each with multiple jets. So in the case of Netflix, I'll talk about what each of those stages was. And then a fuzzy vision of the future. And again, I'll share an example with Netflix. And a long-term strategy. These things do not happen overnight. Netflix was formed 23 years ago. And you need a long-term strategy to make improbable things happen. And then you have to have the ability to solve this never-ending series of problems. And that's where the consumer science and the experimentation comes in. Sometimes you don't even know how to solve the next stage of problems when you're in it. And this requires that constant experimentation. And last, this culture of iconoclast. So the idea here is the people who start a company are starters, and frankly, they're not going to be right forever. So you'll probably need a second, exec team, 10 years later, or a third, 15 or 20 years, because you need those new people who understand that what got us here won't get us there. And these iconoclasts are always challenging everybody's belief. So Philip gave the quick background. This is me. The last 5 years, I've been focused on teaching. I do workshops, exec events, and obviously the last year I've been maniacally focused online, and really have been having great fun doing that. All right, so my second chapter, I want to talk about some of this stuff in the context of Netflix. By the way, Irving, that was freaking awesome. Irving is my producer. So Netflix. The initial vision, this is 1998. This is Reed Hastings on the left. That's the co-founder, Mark Randolph. And 1998, they were saying it's Netflix. It's not DVD Flix. Netflix began as a DVD by mail company. And their initial fuzzy vision, if you will, was to launch downloading in the year 2000. Okay, this was the fuzzy vision at the beginning. And it turned out that Netflix did not launch streaming until 2007. So they were phenomenally wrong, but at least they had this is how we start, and this is what we'll do next in our second wave. So I want to give you, I joined Netflix in 2005. The product vision was, we're going to get big on DVDs by mail, right? And then the second step, when we have enough customers, when we can afford to get rights, and frankly, when the internet bandwidth is fast enough, that is when we will engage in streaming. And that actually happened in 2007. And then once we're an entirely digital service, finally, then and only then will we expand worldwide. So this was a fuzzy vision of the future using that GLEe model. And it was explicit about the ordering and the sets of problems that we would be working to focus on at each stage. And this GLEe model, it really encourages this good behavior, okay? Here's a juicy quote. Every successful company rides the growth wave until it crests and falls. The secret is to create the next growth wave before the first one collapses. This is from Jack Kagan. He was a financial analyst focused on Yahoo. And Yahoo got one thing, it got big on search, but had no follow-up. And consequently, it's dead. And this really reinforces the importance of always knowing what's next. And this GLEe model forces people to think long-term, because in the long term, anything is possible. So Netflix, it worked out. In 1997, the one DVD was sent by mail. So just think about that. That was a very inauspicious beginning. That was the year that the DVD player began. By 2007, finally, the streaming launch. 2015, Netflix was in 190 countries. That's the worldwide. And guess what? Netflix had a fourth chapter that it's maniacally focused on now. And testament to this is it won 21 Emmys last year. I think it had 160 nominations. Last year was the year that Netflix got even better than HBO at creating original content. But you can see in the long term how radically Netflix was able to change in this sort of multi-stage rocket approach. Now, inventing the future is messy and dirty and hard, and I'll show you just how messy it was. There's the punk company starting a DVD by mail business, and it wasn't working. It had like 2,000 DVDs available, and you'd charge like $5 to get your DVD back and forth in the mail, and it took like 5 days. It really, like every startup, it sucked at the beginning. And then in a leap of faith, I mean, honestly, if this didn't work, the company would die. They invented the all-you-can-eat subscription, which all of you are enjoying now, and that worked. Actually, despite what I said about this multi-step approach, we were 1 week from launching a DVD by mail system in the UK in 2005. And then we realized that we were getting ahead of ourselves. So we canceled it. That was a year and a half of work that we canceled. That's how messy and dirty and stupid, we were. We launched downloading, and that was the only language that exists for what you guys call streaming today. That was in 2007, January. There were 300 titles that our customers called steamy romance, which is code for something else. Finally, in 2009, 2010, we launched streaming only in Canada. That was the first time we were a streaming service. This was a big experiment. It was called Max. It was this very entertaining host. Our theory was that unique movie finding tools. It was like a movie genie who helped you to find your next great movie. And that was a year or two of effort. And that was a massive failure. House of Cards worked out. Yay. I'm guessing most of you have watched it. Quickster. Netflix had to separate in the United States its DVD by mail business from its streaming business. And that was an incredibly huge failure. It was a revolt. 800,000 customers canceled in 1 quarter. And Netflix didn't even execute this plan. It just said it was going to do it. And the market cap of the company went from 40 billion down to 10 billion. This is how messy and dirty inventing the future is. And of course, House of Cards was great, but then Netflix killed it. It was mainly a cultural decision, if you will. Cindy Holland, who had signed them, it took her in 20 minutes, she made the decision to kill it because Kevin Spacey had been implicated in and dirty things were. And then, of course, it ends pretty well with 160 Emmy nominations last year. All right, so there's that multi-stage rocket. And as I alluded to it, this next stage, there's always the next one. So Netflix has been maniacally focused on original content. So I just want to give you a little bit more context about Netflix, and then I want to put you in the seat. I want you to imagine that you are the product leader at Netflix at these various points in time. What would you do? What would you focus on? I'm going to be using Slido for that. So the product strategy, I'm going to just make it look like we're smart. Here are the 5 ideas that work. Every time that we created a product that was simpler and easier, it improved retention. Fewer people canceled every month. Every time we created a more personalized experience, helping you to find and connect with movies you'll love, the experience got better, retention improved. In the old days of DVD by mail, at some point we figured out how to get a disc faster to you in the mail. That improved, and of course, streaming improved. Giving you what you want instantly was important. And then giving you the capability to watch anytime and anywhere, any device that you has a screen is magically pre-wired for Netflix. And then the last, it's clear today that original content is helpful. So these are the 5 strategies that work. So in that previous slide, I gave you that multi-step plan, the focus at a different time. And in this slide, I've given you the 5 key strategies that work. I've given you tons of context, but it's still, it's hard to figure out what to do. Netflix is a bit of an idea machine. So at any moment when I was VP of product, there was like 100 things that we could do that we theorized that would help delight customers in these hard to copy margin ways. And I just want to give you a sense of the challenges in this first stage. This is the DVD by mail stage that I walked into in 2005. We had a growing DVD by mail library, maybe 20,000 choices. At the time, it cost about $22 a month for 3 DVDs at a time. You could have 3 DVDs sitting on top of your computer or your television to choose from. And then this damn company, Blockbuster, that was huge. And we were this little punk startup, came along and they copied our service. Not only that, they offered something called total access. Instead of waiting for the disc to go back and forth in the mail, you could walk into the store and instantly trade your disc out. And at this point, 5% of our customers canceled every month. At startup, it was 10%. Today, it's about 2%. So this is the situation. We're under fire from Blockbuster, and we haven't figured out how to make money yet. So now I give you the shopping list, if you will. So I want you to pretend that you're the product leader at Netflix at this moment in time. And I want you to tell me which 1, 2, or 3 things that you would focus on over the next year or 2 to help propel the rocket ship into the future. And there are no right or wrong answers. I will play back what worked and didn't work. And frankly, you will be as surprised as we about what worked and what didn't. Rebecca, how you doing out there?
Hey.
So where would you put your chips? What do you think is important on this list to execute?
I think logically I would go, well, let's just speed up the DVD by mail delivery, but that's not even really going to beat just walking into a shop and constantly changing it. But some people are lazy and they don't want to get out of their nice cozy sofa. So maybe if we speed it up.
Okay, so tell me the 2 things on this list that you would go with.
So I'd stick with my speed up the DVD.
Okay.
Maybe launch original content, but we might not be ready for that yet. It's quite expensive bet.
Right? So, in the rocket ship's journey, is it time to start investing in original content or not? Right? Is this a case, if you did, of getting ahead of yourself or not? This is the question, right? Okay, so do you want to stick with your 2 answers?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, cool. Hey, Philip, you out there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Are you surprised by any of these responses?
I'm surprised that lower price plans isn't higher, but maybe that's just because everyone's thought about it a bit more. I went for personalized merchandising because you can beat Foster if you get better recommendations.
Yeah, so let me tell you what happened. So probably a first surprise is we did experiment with social. You get movie ideas from your friends. It totally failed. It turns out that in the context of movies, social doesn't work very well, mainly because your friends have sucky movie tastes. And you don't really want people to know exactly what you're watching. Last week I binge watched 19 Years of Cake Boss, right? So that was our probably biggest failure on this list. Let's see, I think it was Rebecca. She was right. The speeding up DVD by mail, that was creating core value for customers. And you were right. It didn't compete with instantly in the stores. But frankly, what was going on in the background, we were beginning to invest in streaming, okay? Launching lower price was a huge win for us. In the beginning, the reason we gave 3 DVDs at a time is we thought everybody was like us. They were movie buffs. They just had to have lots of choices. It turned out that normal people, cared much more about getting a $9.99 price. So that was incredibly important. Strategically, we focused on personalization forever. So a surprise here is we actually launched advertising and we sold used discs. We did ad banners on the site, and it did not make retention worse. And that was how we generated in 2006, the first year that we were profitable was because of 40 million in operating income from ads and 40 million from the DVD sales. And yeah, we actually experimented with original content in 2005. Something called Red Envelope Studios. It was a massive failure, okay? So we were not ready to experiment in a DVD era, but obviously it worked out when we were streaming. So here's the things I want you to take away here. First, the things that worked for us were all about understanding at the core what made our product great. And that was getting lots of DVDs, creating amazing value for customers, this all-you-can-eat thing, and then getting the next day's discs in the mail to you. Notice this really didn't have much to do with the website experience. It was all operational. Okay, it wasn't until later in streaming that the experience really mattered. We made a long-term bet on personalization. After 20 years, it's clear that it was helpful. And this is when we were beginning to understand this model of delighting customers in hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways. It's not enough just to delight your customer. You want to create hard-to-copy advantage. Some of those hard to copy advantages were brand, or just being big, having an economy scale, or unique technology like our personalization. And that margin enhancement, the 80 million in operating income, that's like jet fuel. It's really important to create shareholder value. And then this is just hard. Like every company out there was succeeding with social. Who could have predicted that social wasn't going to work in the context of movies? And this is just, experimentation is required, and consumer science is hard. It's really hard to predict the future. You just got to try and see what works. So here's another pop quiz. Now it's 2007. We have launched Watch Instantly. We couldn't use the word streaming because our customers thought it meant streamlining, which sounded bad. And the initial launch metric was 5% of our customers watched at least 15 minutes in a month. That's how we started. And we had 300 steamy romance titles available. And we were only on PCs, only on your IBM PC laptop, right? So here's the situation. And again, Idea Factory, here were all the choices. So you're the product leader. It's 2007. You're trying to get focused on a set of things, at that stage, if you will, and invent the future at the same time. So what do you focus on? None of the manufacturers would play with us. So we started to build our own hardware box. That was the fastest way we could think about getting to the television. It would be helpful to get to Mac, not just PC. It'd be helpful to be on mobile devices. There was a company called Stars where there were 1,000 TV and movie shows that we could get the rights to. That was an interesting opportunity. Should we give other, ways of providing value, like binge watching? And to what degree should we focus on personalization? And that was our shopping list, if you will. Hey, Holly, how you doing?
Thanks.
What do you think of this list?
It's interesting. Thinking about the time that you were thinking about this, I probably would have picked ways to kind of try and bake our product into people's lives a little bit more. So making it accessible on more devices and getting more content. So I probably would have gone launch on mobile devices and then sign Stars deal, maybe.
Yeah, got it. Okay, Rebecca, you out there?
I am indeed. I actually went for more focus on personalization, but I think Holly made a good point that, well, if you haven't got that many titles, then you're not going to be able to personalize a lot. So you kind of might need a combination of both. But if you want to keep people going, I always hate that thing where you get to the end of a really good series and then you're like, oh, I've got to find the next one that's going to be great. And you have to go through a load of crap ones to get to the good one. So totally. I went for personalization.
Well, let me give you the big surprises. We actually invested in building a TV connected device, a hardware device. And we were 1 month from launching, and then we canceled it. Okay. And the reason why was our investors, our shareholders were afraid we were going to go into the low margin hardware business. So that was we actually threw 100 engineers out of the building, and that's the formation story for a company called Roku, okay? So that's a big surprise. We launched on Mac. That was helpful. Turns out that the mobile devices in 2007 really weren't ready. That streaming to these tiny screens was not important. Netflix didn't get big on mobile devices till something like 2013 or 14, much later. The Stars deal was incredibly helpful. It's the content stupid. That's what we were learning. And then the binge watching, we were desperate. We were desperate to do anything we could to create more value for our customers. That was a happy accident. And then we knew from a long-term point of view that personalization, our belief was it was critically important at every stage of this multi-rocket journey. In the early days, at some point we had 100,000 DVDs to choose from. Personalization helped you to find that needle in a haystack. When we had only 300 sucky titles, it helped you to find the 2 or 3 you might like. And today, personalization is helping Netflix to make investment decisions. They know that 100 million people watch Stranger Things, so they invest $500 million in it. They know that 20 million people will watch BoJack Horseman based on all their personalization data, so they'll invest $100 million in it. So that has been persistent and consistent, the focus on personalization, which you guys totally nailed here, which I deeply appreciate. So here's the learning. We realized that we were a streaming platform, not a hardware company. It was about 2 years later that the Xbox finally said yes to us. In the first month, 1 million folks were streaming on Xbox. And at that point, the Wii desperately wanted to work with us. And then the PlayStation wanted to work with us. And then eventually every hardware player in the world. You've got the continued investment in personalization. The episodic TV content, it turned out that was incredibly helpful. Netflix went from 80% movies and 20% TV shows in the DVD era to the flip. It was 80% TV and 20% DVD. And that was totally unanticipated. But it turns out that the investment in TV episodes, you can invest for 5 years of series. It was fun, and you create a connection with characters and a storyline at the beginning. And you know, we've all watched like 6 years of House of Cards or Schitt's Creek, and it was fundamentally a better investment than movies. The way to think about it, nobody wants to watch Rocky 120. Okay, movies don't work that way. Finally, the invention of the first focus on original content was House of Cards, and that worked, thankfully, at this point. And I just described binge watching as a happy accident. And no, it wasn't a purposeful thing. We didn't experiment with it. We just did it because we were freaking desperate. And this is the way that growth of many companies works. You know, you have kind of sort of plan a fuzzy vision, but there's lots of things that surprise you. You know, we were in flight with streaming, and we had to invent all sorts of different ideas on the fly. Just the way it works. So in the international journey, the third stage of the rocket for Netflix, things went really well. Today, Netflix is in 100 countries. It's just, they tried for years to get into China. It doesn't work. They finally licensed their stuff to a partner there. You can't watch it in Syria, Crimea, or North Korea. But, you know, this is amazing how quickly they expanded around the whole world. And then original content, I'm guessing that most of you watch Stranger Things or Dark or Orange is the New Black or Money Heist. And there's also really neat and interesting experiments. This is essentially an episodic TV series married with the documentary format. It's binge watching for documentaries. Documentaries used to be boring. Netflix has found a way to make it incredibly interesting. So just they've been experimenting with all sorts, you know, what do TV and movie shows look like? And it's been wild experimentation that we never saw in the old days. You know, how do you think about this? You know, and then there's wonderful guilty pleasures out there, Selling Sunset or Indian matchmaking. Netflix is taking stories from all over the world and it's bringing them to people all around the world. It learned at some point that, frankly, it's not a good predictor of your movie taste to know what country you're from. There's no filter in the algorithms to acknowledge that a person's French and lives in France and speaks French. You know, this is some of the insight that they've learned from a personalization point of view. And of course, there were failures. This is Chelsea Handler. Netflix got pretty close to almost live TV. Chelsea Handler would do sort of a talk show, current events. Within an hour, it was lip synced and dubbed into 40 different languages around the world. And this was a failure. But you can think of this as almost a mini experiment with live television. Of course, everything didn't work. There's wild experimentation and tons of learning about what works at each step or what doesn't. So here's the question. What's next for Netflix? We talked about that juicy quote from the analyst at Yahoo talked about how important it is to know what's next. So this is the 4 steps of Netflix's multi-stage rocket, from DVD to streaming to international to original content. And it's your job as a product leader to always know what's next, to have theories and hypotheses that helps organize all your thinking about what's important and what's not, to get from here to the next stage. There's a juicy quote. Sam Altman's the chairman of Y Combinator. There's lots of successful Y Combinator startups. Most recently, Airbnb went public. But his counsel is, be more ambitious. Then talk about that big vision and work relentlessly towards it. But always have a next step. And the question is, what's Netflix's next step? And this one in Slido is organized as a word cloud. So, be your theory, your hypothesis for what's going to be critically important, the new ideas for Netflix 5 or 10 years from now. And this is, I'm nicely encouraging you in inventing the future to think big, to think long-term, to think ahead, but always have a hypothesis of what's next that will help to organize the thinking. Darwin, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Just coming off mute.
What do you think? What's next? What's next?
I don't know. I wonder if there's something where we move from sitting back to getting more involved in the entertainment.
Yes.
Some sort of choose your own adventure.
That's
I know
great.
I've experimented with this a little bit, but some sort of merging of games and storytelling.
Yeah. So, who do you see as Netflix's competition today?
PlayStation.
Good insight. Okay. It's not Disney Plus. It's not Hulu. It's Amazon Prime. They're fighting for your screen time, Darwin, right?
Definitely.
You're making choices every day about whether you get on Twitter or Instagram or Fortnite or whatever else, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of those things, that might take. So what are the ideas on this slide that sort of resonate for you in your hypothesis, Darwin?
I think it's that thing about interactive movies or interactive content.
There you
go. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, boy, gaming was a big year last year, all online. It was good for streaming companies too. It was good for education companies too. It was good for me. It's a crazy world. Who would have thunk, right?
Yeah. People want to play out their own story.
Great. I see the virtual reality, the VR. I see education. Is Netflix making us stupid binge watching? By the way, there's a lot of smart documentaries out there. And there's some sassy ones. The one that featured and throwing the statue into the harbor. I got to out of that one.
Yeah.
Anyways, so you guys are doing a great job as product leaders, forming these theories and hypotheses. Thanks for your help, Darwin. So here's my hypothesis, and Darwin was pretty closely aligned with me, which is you can actually see little experiments today on Netflix with, I call it, interactive stories. I think it has the potential to delight customers in hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways. And it's super early days. So my guess is today, about 1% of customers are watching at least 1 hour a month of interactive content. The hard-to-copy stuff is the tools and technology, and frankly, the partnerships with the stores will create a new kind of network effect. And then the margin enhancing, if you could drive this number 1% to 15 or 20%, that would either improve retention or bring new people onto the service. And that's how I think about that model lighting in hard to copy margin enhancing ways. So there you have that model. And Darwin got that today Netflix, they call it competing magic moments. They want to be your choice when you pull up your screen or you pull up your phone, because they know they're competing with Fortnite and Instagram and a zillion others. It's just a different world. And so some of the experiments, if you got kids, you might have noticed the DreamWorks Puss in book, Choose Your Own Adventure. This is a favorite of mine, Captain Underpants, Epic Choice-O-Rama. Or there's for the adults on the chat and YouTube. Any of you that have watched Black Mirror's Bandersnatch, if you could chat about it and say that you watched it, if it was thumbs up or thumbs down, and if Irving, you could report back on what you hear, I'd be really curious. Because it's early days, and is this a delightful enough experience that they'll continue to double down to invest twice as much each year? That's really the big question. That happened to win an Emmy, which is a big deal. So very exciting. Another example of interactive stories is Breakable Kimmy Schmidt, and so these are all things you should try and think about. Is this experiment work? All right. So now, did you see Irving from the chat?
Couple of thumbs up coming through.
Okay. Could you tell? Would you guess that I'm right that about 1% have watched it, or more or less?
That?
Yeah. Right. But this is what experimenting with inventing the future. These are these little early experiments, and then every year you're consciously deciding, okay, did we have enough traction? So we'll double down in the investment in that area each and every year. And this is how 5 or 10 years from now it might be big. All right, so I've given you these 5 stages and the hypothetical 5th stage. But I want to just share with you how this plays out over time. So in this top row, I've put all the things that Netflix has learned that are successful, that work. They understand fundamentally the core value of what they're doing. They found the locus of things that delight customers in these hard to copy margin enhancing ways, where margin just means make money or create shareholder value, because that's rocket fuel. You get more rocket fuel, then you can experiment more in the future. You can get more content, more interactive stuff. You can sign even bigger name people. And those things come through a variety of experiments. So for each of these stages, I've shared the successes, the things that during that stage that worked out for Netflix, that were discovered to work. And you'll notice here, it's almost equal part failure. And then think in that journey of all the accumulated knowledge in the people. And that's where the culture comes in. That it's the culture that helps people to learn these things and develop a set of skills and behaviors that help you to navigate into the future. It's the vision, the plan that gives some sense of direction, but also is flexible enough to let the experimentation take you, where it needs or wants to go. And the other thing that I'll give you about this GLEe model, if you will, the multi-phased rocket ship approach, at any moment in time, you want to be kind of careful and thoughtful about the level of investment. So in 2010, Netflix put about 20% of its resources against DVDs because they knew that eventually they'd have to shed that rocket, leave it behind. They put 30% into streaming, 40% into international. And you can see in the early days of originals, it was only a 10% experimentation. They were trying to figure out how important it was. And obviously it was important. So now I go forward to 2020 and look at the investment today. It's only 5% investment in DVDs. There are Americans that still get DVDs by mail. 30% into streaming, 30% in international, and they're totally leaning forward on original content. Turns out they have this economy of scale, and the original content is the hard to copy thing that really has helped Netflix, dominate essentially. And notice there's only a 5% investment in the interactive. They don't know if that's going to work or not. Next year it could be 2%, or next year it could be 10%, depending on what they learn in 2021. All right, so I want to bring things home and get you to reflect on, your rocket ship, your current company, your current startup, your current big company that's trying to get even bigger, whatever it is. I just want to reiterate some Pretty important things, okay? So in your rocket ship, what I want you thinking about is, do we have a strategy? Do we have a plan? Do we use the GLEe model to develop that long-term vision that drives people to a place 5, 10, 15, or 20 years from now? Are we thoughtful about how much we invest against each of those stages? Are we always cogent about the product strategy, our theories and hypotheses about how will we delight customers in hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways? And is the language of my hypothesis is, as Darwin said, his hypothesis was that interactive content of games was going to be an important investment 5 or 10 years out. And this is how these ideas are started. And then you experiment to see if that hypothesis is valued. And in this case, that brings you to, I call it the consumer science, where you have the data. It could be qualitative, it could be focus groups, usability, it could be surveys, or the big dog, results of A/B tests. And being maniacal about experimenting to see what customers value or don't, that's what I call customer obsession. And do you have a system that enables fast-paced experimentation to discover what works or doesn't? And are you always trying to figure out what is the core of what makes our product great? In the old days in Netflix, it was just get the DVD in the mail the next day. That was the core. Last year it's the original content, stupid. That's the core value of Netflix. And are you always building to that next step function? And can you name what that next stage of the journey will be? And then these three things, I work with lots of different companies and have started successful companies and failed companies, but it's the culture that is often underutilized or undervalued, okay? Because that's where the great judgment, and remember, this is always a series of decisions about people, about product, and the business. And the culture helps people to make great decisions much more consistently. And frankly, people come and go in an organization. It's the culture that stays. And by the way, the culture changes over time as well. But culture is all about what are the behaviors and skills that we value in our employee. And in the companies that are inventing the future, two of the critical values, they tend to be around intellectual curiosity, right? If you were trying to colonize Mars, like, how the hell would we do that? And this sort of thirst for knowledge and learning. And then the courage, to stand up in a meeting and say, we should be doubling down on interactive stories. That takes courage. You have experts at each of these stages. I would suck if I were the product leader at Netflix today. I'm good at startup with a proof of concept that's ready to scale. Like 5 years after I joined, they needed a statistician PhDs in the role, right? That's just not me. The company went from all about the technology. Half the company is in LA today. They have a co-CEO, Reed Hastings, the technology dude, and Ted Sarandos is the content dude, right? It's just how important content is. And then the last is they have this culture at Netflix of iconoclast. There's the recognition that what got them this far won't get them to 10 or 15 years out. Everybody dares to challenge everyone else's thinking, which is an important part of the culture there. All right, so there's just one last thing that I find is super helpful. For product leaders, I hope this will make you feel good because, gosh, this is a hard job. And this is Reed Hastings. He's the co-CEO of Netflix today. That thing is patience, okay? It takes a long time to colonize Mars. It takes a long time for a punk DVD by mail company to dominate in original content, to run circles around HBO, which is really improbable. I've shown the market cap of Netflix at these various points, and you'll notice you can hardly tell the company had any value up until maybe 2011, and you can see that value becoming more and more important. It just takes a long time to get all these parts and pieces together. It requires patience. And you'll also notice it's a bumpy road. If we forked in, we would see some of the big successes and the failures that fundamentally drove the stock price up or down. And with that, I'll say thank you. Yeah, my favorite episodic TV content of last year was the Queens Gambit. My two daughters, Kelsey, Brittany, and my wife, Kristen, we all watched it together, and it was just phenomenal. I have one last thing to ask of you. And my friend, excuse me, Irving's going to drop a link in. This is that crazy moment. I feel like I'm a street performer sometime. I'm passing the hat, but I am not asking for money. What I'd love is your feedback. So you can pull out your mobile device, or you can, the link is being dropped into the chat and messaging. A link will magically pop up when you use your camera to focus it on the QR code. Click on that. It's a SurveyMonkey survey. 0 sucks, 10 is great, or whatever words you want to use. But 0 sucks, 10 is great. Anyways, choose whatever number you like. And then there's one more question, which is what was good about this presentation? And then one other thing, how could I make it better? This is like my 630th survey. So this is how I've learned to do talks and workshops and exec events. If you read stuff of mine, you'll notice that I put a SurveyMonkey link at the end of everything I write as well. This is my consumer science, if you will. And your feedback is incredibly helpful to me. So thank you in advance for giving me that feedback. There is a link. You can visit my baby website at gibsonbiddle.com. Towards the top of the page, there's a link. I put all the stuff you need together in one place. By the way, it's the same QR code as before. But there's a PDF of the presentation waiting. I wrote a 12-part series on how to define your product strategy. There's one chapter on the GLEe model, which is about that multi-stage rocket. And also, I'm doing something new, which I've been having great fun with. So thank you, all of you. But the thing I'm doing new, I'm guessing that a lot of you ask questions in Slido, and I'm going to hang out forever answering more questions that you have. But I'm never able to answer all the questions. So what I've been doing is pulling them together, and I have this Ask Gib product management column on Substack. But the link is on that special page I built for you. But if you go there, I have like 400 questions now. I'd love it if you'd upvote your favorite, and I try every day to answer one of those questions. People have been binge reading my answers. It's fun. It's also an effort on my part to stay in touch with folks to understand what their real issues are today, because I'm older than dirt. So your questions are really helpful to me to understand, what are the challenges that you're going through, and hopefully I can reflect on them in a way that's helpful to you. Okay, my dear friend Irving, I don't think we need to share my slides anymore. Why don't you bring back the whole team? I want to say hi to them.
Perfect.
Cool. Thanks, team. Any good or bad surprises in today's talk? I think
it always looks
Go ahead.
simple when you look at all these amazing companies who have achieved it, but it's always encouraging that they started at the beginning with failures. And I know that Netflix even tried to offer themselves a blockbuster. So it's just, I think it's hard when you're not at that glorious position and can look back and you're still trying to work it out and making loads of mistakes every day.
Totally. Yeah. Like anybody who tells you this is easy, they're full of it, right? Honestly, from a product strategy point of view, I'm used to getting it right about half the time. But if you can get it right at half the time, you can build amazing things. Okay. It's just, this is the part where consumer science is hard, getting inside people's heads, understanding what they truly value and don't, as the world changes every year, is pretty hard. So, hey, Irving, can you see the Slido Q&A? Is there some action there or some questions there?
I can, yeah. We've got about 3 questions.
That's great. You want to take a shot at them?
Yeah, sure. So we got the first one. What is the thing that makes stakeholders accept experimentation as learning instead of a costly and risky business?
Okay. So we have these three forces. You need a plan. You need the consumer science, the experimentation, and you have the culture. Gosh, how do I handle the stakeholders? First, I will articulate my high-level product strategies. I will be super clear about the metrics we're using to measure if we're succeeding or not, okay? So in this one, let's imagine we're talking to a CFO, okay? So here's the plan. Here are my metrics. CFOs care a lot about metrics, and they also want to know that you care about the business as well. That's the margin enhancing part. But then I'm just honest with them. I say, I'll share a roadmap with them, and it'll have all the things that we're going to do in the next quarter. And I'll say, I have high confidence about the projects that we're doing in this first quarter. But frankly, we're going to learn so much in just this next quarter that the projects in the second, third, and fourth quarter will change. And frankly, I don't exactly understand the timing. I don't know how much we can do this year or not, because we will be experimenting. Now, I will say that it's hard to say that early in your career, okay? Later in my career, it was much easier because I could say, this, I built this, this worked, this failed. So I think what I'm leaving you with is the notion that personally, it takes a while to build up enough credibility, to have enough track record that shows that you have the judgment to guess correctly more than half the time. But the things that you can always communicate is you care a lot about the data, the metrics that will help measure if you're right or wrong, and you care a lot about the business. That is to say, creating margin or building shareholder value. And think about that one model, that other model I gave you. Your job is to delight customers in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. The delight part can be art and craft, but you're also trying to generate the jet fuel, the margin, the profit that lets you invest even more in the future. I guess the short answer is it takes time to build your own credibility, to be comfortable and confident enough to say the things that I just said to a CEO or a CFO. It just takes a while, but you can do it.
Cool. Do you want to answer another one?
Yeah.
Cool.
Hey.
I'll just work down the list. So we've got this one. If you were the head of product at the BBC, what would your GLEe approach be?
Okay, this is the teacherly. Okay, well, I could probably take a swag at it. Swag means stupid, wild ass guess. So I don't exactly know where the BBC is in its journey today. But, okay, so my guess is that at some point, okay, so I don't know if the BBC has created its network of devices, if it's available to stream on all devices, but that's going to be important at some point. And then I think it's going to be maniacally focused on creating local content. That's how it can win against, the big dogs like Amazon Prime or Netflix. So those steps will be somewhere in the journey. BBC also, they can experiment with things that Netflix probably won't do for 10 years. Live content and sports, okay? So those two things would be on my experiment list at some point. I'm just doing a swag, and I'm not sure how I'd order it because I don't exactly know what BBC looks like today. But great question. I can't remember if the GLEe model is like all of my essays are only 3 minutes long, so read it. I even put the very specific questions, and if you go all the way to the end, you'll notice I actually created a Google slide, pre-formatted Google slide, so you could build this yourself, or you can go to one of my workshops someday. I do a 4-hour version, an 8-hour version. I think I'm doing one, and it's sort of Sweden-based. It means European time. I only speak English. But you can go to my baby website, scroll down the page, and see when my next workshop is.
Great. The next one is, what do you feel the hardest product problem that Netflix solved while you were there was, and of any, and it could be of any type, so tech, people, infrastructure, partnerships, positioning?
Yeah, probably the personalization. So the hard part about personalization, it's the consummate, there is no overnight success. And so Netflix, the company didn't prove until maybe 2012 that personalization actually improved retention. Okay. That's after like 14 years of effort. Okay. So, but I'll tell you what we did. We had a proxy metric. It was the percentage of members who rated at least 50 titles in their first 2 months with the service. And it always astounds people when I tell them that we got that metric all the way up to 30%. So 30% of our members in their first 2 months with the service rated at least 50 movies or TV shows. It took us a lot to get the data to understand your movie taste. And then the next thing was we had to invent. So we have the data on the movies, we have the data on you, and then we magically connect them via algorithms and presentation layer tactics. And the metric that we use for that, for predicting, Holly, I'm guessing on a 0 to 5 scale of stars, you would give Stranger Things a 4. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you would give Breaking Bad a 5?
I think
I want to be wrong.
Things.
Give me your number.
Yeah.
What's your number?
3.
3. Okay. So great.
Yeah.
So RMSE basically in aggregate measures the delta between a prediction of how much Holly will like something versus how much she really liked it. Okay. And that's how we measured the efficacy of the algorithm. You know, there were a lot of things that we learned, but one of them is the more algorithms, the better. We actually did something called the Netflix Prize. We said we'd give developers all over the world $1 million if they could build better algorithms than us. And of course they did. And we paid out $1 million within 2 years. But the answer was there are hundreds of different algorithms that are blended together to predict everybody's movie taste. So that was just an interesting problem because it took so freaking long and it's never over. You know, today the personalization, a big part of its job is predicting how much you will like a new series. So Netflix can just figure out what the right level of investment is. I mean, they want to bring every story to life, but they know that only 1 million people will be interested in Everest climbing documentaries. So they'll only invest 5 million in that, right? Whereas they're happy to invest whatever they did in Indian matchmaking. So anyways, so the personalization was probably the gnarliest problem. It required the most patience and endurance and the most highest level of fast-paced experimentation.
Cool. Thanks for that. I kind of, I personally voted this question up as well. So how did people feel about the failures and how did they recover from them? And then it goes on to say, it must have been demotivating to scrap so many things after so much effort gets put into trying to launch some of these products that you talked about or some of these experiments or initiatives. Yeah.
So let me give you the 2 worst ones. A team has spent 1.5 years of their lives launching DVD by mail service in the UK. And it's 1 week from launch and you kill the project. That's devastating, okay? You know, people have moved there, et cetera. That's just freaking hard, right? And over-communicate the reasons why. But, you know, that was really hard. And then just being clear about, you know, what mistakes we all made to get there. Fast forward to the decision 1 month from launch not to launch our own hardware device, okay? At that point, it was funny. It wasn't as devastating. So Paul Eschker was the product manager who worked for me. He was working on that project. You know, Reed Hastings called me on the weekend and said, you know what? I don't think the Wall Street is going to let us do this. I mean, if we launch it, our valuation will drop in half instantly because they're afraid we'll turn into a hardware company. And then the other challenge was that if we were building our own box, all the hardware players would assume that we had an inside track, we had an advantage. I mean, so I got the business rationale. You know, it actually was Barry McCarthy, the CFO, that really said this is a bad idea. Anyways, so but Reed, the CEO, said, "Hey, Gib, do you think I should go visit Paul at his house on the weekend, or is a phone call okay?" And I said, "A phone call is okay." So we'd all been through these experiences before. We understood that this was a series of experimentations. You know, at the end of the day, we were making decisions on behalf of the company and the customers. And we're, you know, the building was full of, I call them well-formed adults. So, you know, Paul got the phone call from the CEO. They spent an hour talking about it. He felt valued. He knew his work was valued. And then, frankly, 10 months later, we finally got a yes from Xbox. So it worked out in the end. I mean, I asked Paul, like, was it a mistake to build a box? He said, no, I think it was an amazing prototype. We showed that prototype to Xbox, PlayStation, to the Wii. And without it, you know, it would have taken a year or two longer to get. So he doesn't think we really made a mistake. Anyways, so much learning tied into all of that. And just creating this culture of well-formed adults was incredibly valuable. Just takes a long time to get to that point.
Cool. As an iconoclast, how did you overcome having, or how do you overcome having less credibility earlier in your career?
How to which?
How do you overcome having less credibility earlier in your career?
Here's the good and the bad news. The longer you are on your career, the more track record you have. Okay, but if you get it right 40% of the time, you know, you're not going to do as well as if you get it right 60% of the time. Anyways, gosh, at Netflix, it's funny. We really weren't that into psychological safety. I mean, I still think about this. I'm not sure if I believe in it. You know, we would ask everybody to guess the results of A/B tests. And, you know, we were trying to learn together, but we were also trying to understand fundamentally which product leaders had great judgment and which ones probably didn't. And the probably didn't folks over time, you know, it just didn't feel like Netflix was the right environment for them, right? So that's just kind of reality. I mean, by the way, it wasn't nasty. Like I already told you, like I was the right person for those 5 years at Netflix, but you know, I went to my next startup with a proof of concept that was ready to scale, which is Chegg, and that was a much better fit after 5 years. You know, that's really what I love to do. I find startups that have, you know, 50 to 100 people, and then I help them scale. And then 5 years later, my God, the company feels too big and I don't know everybody's name. And this is just freaking me out. Anyways, somewhere in there, I think I answered the question.
I think so, yeah. It gave us a little perspective on it, at least. What are the best ways you've found to weed out some of the bad proxy metrics that get passed around?
That's a great question. So again, I don't know which essay. Essay 4 is all about developing proxy metrics. So isolating proxy metrics is really hard, okay? And it takes time, it takes patience. You know, people tend to regard Netflix makes good decisions, makes decisions quickly. You know, a lot of that is true. When it came to time to form proxy metrics, I was a little surprised my first year how long the conversation would happen. Sometimes it's 3, 6, or 9 months. The reality is, can we find the data? Does the data, in this case, correlate with retention? If we improve this proxy metric, will it actually improve retention? And then in the long term, is it causal? Okay. And so that takes multiple years to answer those questions. When we launched streaming, we were so freaking excited because for the first time, we knew if people watched something or not. Like in the DVD, like we send the DVD, it would come back. We didn't know if they watched it. When we launched streaming, it was pretty funny. We instrumented everything. And then we just wallowed in way too much data. We couldn't get any insight. And over time, we just isolated one simple metric. I shared it with you already. The percentage of members that watched at least 15 minutes in a month. Why 15 minutes? It turned out that the shortest TV episode that we had was 15 minutes long. I never use averages. Those are typically bad. But in that case, what was the smallest unit of value that we create for a customer? Could we get the data? It turned out yes. Was that metric movable? Turns out it was. And then it gave us insight about how much to invest in or not. It helped us to decide in the context of A/B test what we should do or not. So that proxy metric, when we launched, 5% of members watched at least 15 minutes in a month. At the end of a year, 20% of members watched at least 15 minutes in a month. At that point, it was clear that we should continue investing. We already knew what to do. More content, more devices, okay? Make it easier to set up and play. Do frickin' binge watching. Those were all the things that we learned, move that proxy metric up and to the right. Is it the same proxy metric today? No, right? At Netflix today, that about 99% of people watch at least 15 minutes in a month. The proxy today is probably something like percentage of members that watch at least 40 hours a month, right? It's probably like 50%. But if they can drive that to 60 or 70%, they'll probably improve. Today, 2% cancel. They'll bring that number down to like 1.8%. Like that's a huge improvement in retention. Anyways, these are how proxy metrics works. But it always makes people feel better to know it takes a long time to isolate the right ones.
Great. We've got two more, I think.
Cool.
You've got time. Did you ever try or fail to solve problems with product and then discover it was something that could be solved without technology?
Oh, yeah. Well, yes, all the time. But I mean, my first couple of years at Netflix, it was a website. It was like an e-commerce site. You pick your DVDs, you create a list, we send you the DVDs. And we're learning how to merchandise and do personalized merchandising. And then at some point, we figured out that none of that really mattered. Okay. What really mattered was get the DVD you wanted the next day in the mail. Okay. Now that was an insight that the product team isolated. My partner in operations, his name was Tom Dillon. Tom Dillon's job was creating these operational centers around the United States. There were like 20 of them. And when we figured this out, Tom's like, shit, we need 100 hubs all over the country to get people the DVD they want the next day in the mail. And so there was this good-natured rivalry. Hey, Gib, what the hell are you doing? The website doesn't matter. Okay. But I was like, dude, it's going to matter. When streaming happens, you're going to be out of a job. And that happened. Right. But it was kind of interesting because what we did is our website merchandising, we were able to tie in. We knew whether the DVD you wanted was available in your local hub. And so we would merchandise it. If it wasn't available, we wouldn't share it with you on the site. This is one of the ways that we got better at getting what you wanted the next day in the mail. Anyways, it was just it was a fun period. But by 2007, the website mattered because that's where you went to frickin' watch a movie. So anyways, I'm just saying that's probably the most extreme case where the website didn't frickin' matter.
Right. Cool. I think
that Netflix prize, the algorithm was better. We executed it, and it didn't improve retention. Okay, imagine that. It turns out it was always this combination of the algorithm and the presentation layer tactics. So notice today on Netflix, it says you'll like Away. That's the Mars story. Because you like female heroes, and you like adventure and space stories. It's giving you context for why you think you'll like it. That's part of the presentation layer experience, which is an algorithm can't do that on its own. So it's always this combination of what the customer sees and the math and algorithms that's underneath the covers. So it's good. You need both designers and engineers. And yeah, occasionally you need product managers too to help bring these forces together. That's why it's a cool job.
Cool. I think thanks for that.
Yeah, well, let's bring it home. Okay, let's do a big smile and a wave. Thanks a lot.
Oh, there we go.
Bristol. I'm so happy you threw the statue in the harbor. That was cool. Thanks a ton for having me, and I can't wait to see the recording. Okay.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Gibson. That's been really, really enlightening. So just a couple of things to finish up with. So obviously, big thanks to Gibson for all his time that he's given us this evening. We're going to have a little bit of time for people just to chat, to try and recreate the experience as best as we could of a in-person product tank. So you should have had a link from meetup.com if you're signed up for the event tonight, which will have a link to a wonder.me room where you can join and just chat in small groups and grab a beer, come back and hopefully see some people in there in a minute. And the other thing to say is that there is a kind of vocational technology trust which is offering some grant funding. So if you've got anything, an idea, early stage around vocational learning, you can get funding of between 15 and 50k grant funding with no equity take or anything. It's just purely funding you can use to develop your idea and test it, run some experiments, find your rocket in the vocational tech space, and we will share the link for that. I think the applications close in a couple of weeks' time, so check that out if you've got any ideas in that space. But yeah, big thanks to Gibson again and Irvin for being excellent producer in the background, and all the other panelists, and hopefully see some of you on the chat in a minute. Thanks very much, everybody.